Welcome to the Center of Everywhere podcast, where we explore stories of rural Minnesotans who are making a difference in their communities. Rural isn't in the middle of nowhere. It is in the center of everywhere.
Welcome to the Center of Everywhere podcast. I'm Marnie Werner, and I'm the Vice President of Research at the Center for Rural Policy and Development. And we are a private, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in rural Minnesota, where we are dedicated to providing data-driven research on rural issues to help our policymakers make more informed decisions affecting the rural people and places of our state. Today, I'm talking with Amy Baldwin, Community Development Director at Otter Tail County, and we're going to be talking about housing. Along with childcare, housing is the biggest problem when it comes to attracting people to greater Minnesota and all our fantastic jobs. But Otter Tail County is working on that. You're basically grabbing the bull by the horns and figuring out how to expand the county's housing supply so anyone who wants to live in Otter Tail County can find a home there. And welcome, Amy.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Marnie. Yeah, we have really jumped in on this issue and glad to be here today to talk about it.
Great. So why don't we just start right there? What is the big build in Otter Tail County and why do you need it?
Sure. So the big build is an intentional effort around housing growth and investment within Otter Tail County. As you mentioned, big challenge in recruiting people to fill the great jobs that we have here in Otter Tail County. And one of the challenges that our employers were facing is as they were able to find folks who were really interested in coming and working for them, but they truly could not find a place to live. And so that was really the start of this a number of years ago. We've had intentional efforts around recruiting people through our Rural Rebound initiative for a number of years now, and then added in now to that the effort to expand the things that people need to live. So thinking about it from an infrastructure standpoint, what do people need to, when we put Otter Tail County on the map and they're thinking about Otter Tail County and connect with one of our employers, what are they going to need to be here? And that's appropriate housing for their preferences and family, childcare, broadband, those things that now in today's world we need. And so thinking about that really wanted to be intentional about the effort, and so branded it as the big build. And what it is an effort to build new or reinvest in 5,000 housing units in Otter Tail County by 2025. And we kicked off in January of 2020.
Okay, 5,000, that sounds like a lot.
It does. But it was, you mentioned that your organization, looks at data and uses data. We also make data-informed decisions. And so we look at our data, look at projections, look at trends, and to really understand what is the need and what's, that is an aspirational goal to get to that number, but we are a third of the way there, even having been faced with the pandemic and really disrupting various components of the effort. We really are still looking to make good progress towards that and really, continue to move the needle and making progress.
Yeah. So let's just back up a little on the issue. Why is housing a problem? What's the bottleneck in Otter Tail County?
Yeah, well, I think it's similar to other areas, from a single family perspective. It's often, and especially now, but in looking back a few years ago, even the cost to build a new home was more than what it would be valued at, and so that gap in cost to build and its value, unless you were bringing equity from a prior home sale or had that ability to fill that gap, it was really challenging to build new housing. And likewise, from the multifamily apartment side, same issue. The cost to build is more than what the rents that an area could support to make the project cash flow from an ongoing perspective. So similar issues to what other areas are facing, but what we've done is develop some intentional programs to fill those financial gaps and help spur people to make those investments, really working across the board in what that looks like. The big build has 4 core action areas that we orient the work around. One is the big piece, the increasing construction of new housing units, but thinking about that across various needs, different income levels, different household types, and really, again, recognizing the spectrum of needs from a housing perspective. The second, knowing that we aren't going to be building housing or very limited housing, really, in a direct sense from the county or our community development agency, but that we need to build partnerships with nonprofit organizations, private developers, and build the capacity of those organizations who are working locally, whether private sector or nonprofit, so we can collectively respond to this issue. So again, how can we spur them to do more of what they're already doing, or really fill a niche that isn't a need that isn't being met today? And then the final 2 action areas are really to directly seek funding that's currently available through the state or other agencies to support new housing projects. So whether, again, it's a private development opportunity that has a gap, how can we help them access those dollars and understand what's available, and bring those investments into Otter Tail County from those other programs? And then the final area from the funding perspective is to advocate for potentially changes or additional funding, or how those funding streams flow, so that we can better access them to particularly meet the needs and challenges that we're facing in Otter Tail County and Greater Minnesota.
That sounds great. So, when we talk about housing development, and we've done some of that research here at the center, it seems like when we talk about housing development in Greater Minnesota, especially in the more rural areas, that often just boils down to putting up an apartment building. And that's because that's often the only thing that will cash flow, given the cost of building versus the cost of what you can actually, charge people in rent. How are you're going beyond apartment buildings, right? And so let's talk a little bit more about how you're making it possible for developers to do something beyond apartment buildings.
Yeah, so we did look at the data also of our new single family construction trends. What were the numbers that were coming online? And really, we never rebounded after the 2008 housing crash. And so we didn't get back to those production numbers of general. And I'll say, Otter Tail County is unique. We have a lot of lakes, we have a lot of lake homes. And that's great. But we also, looked at our communities more. So thinking about, where our year-long residents, our employment base, et cetera, where they are, what were the needs from a housing perspective there, and that entry-level home and more of a moderate or typical home versus a lakefront home was something that we noticed that we weren't in that production levels as we were, back 15 years ago or so. So one of the first things we did is launch a property tax rebate program. So countywide, folks are able to apply for up to 5 years or $10,000 of a rebate for county property taxes associated with the new residents. Many of our communities have partnered on. We have 11 communities who also provide a city rebate or through tax abatement up to $5,000. They went a little more modest, which is great. Still makes a difference in those people looking to build a home within our communities themselves versus, again, on a lakeshore area. Lakeshore properties are eligible, actually, but they do need to be a primary residence. So not for our seasonal visitors, who we appreciate, but it is for folks who are living and hopefully working here in Otter Tail County. So that started in January of 2020 and is in place through the end of 2024. So to start that 5-year window. So we have, a bit of time yet on that program. And so we continue to promote it, really working with our lumber yards, our lenders, realtors, to get that word out. And, if they have folks on the edge. It really can make that difference, particularly in the markets that we've seen the last couple of years. We've heard a lot of stories where it was like, if it wasn't for knowing, we were going to have that assistance in that first 5 years to kind of, level us off, that they want to move forward with that project. So that was, kind of a core, again, from the single family perspective. And then, until we kind of got into the pandemic, we got a little sidetracked, as most people did, and we're doing other pieces. But as a result of the county receiving American Rescue Plan dollars, we then were able to reallocate $2 million into housing programs. And that got into the broader view. We had some limited scope programs through our Housing and Redevelopment Authority, but not a lot of funds available because this was a new initiative, new effort for us from the county's perspective. So to now build up some new programs has been great, using that one-time fund to really push out some new programs. So with that, we have launched a new public infrastructure program. And this is all, the programs were developed in response to what we were hearing from our communities and where were the gaps, what was preventing projects from getting off the ground or moving forward when it came to housing opportunities. So one is we provide some public infrastructure. That was a big one. It's really expensive to put in sewer, water, roads, when there wasn't other opportunities. And that's something we do work with our communities to say, where, do you have areas that can be built without that infrastructure expense? Make sure we're using all of those areas that are currently served. So we do have one community that has tapped into this program, and it is for multifamily in this case, but they were really tapped out and hadn't had new multifamily investment for quite a number of years, and has a large core employer who really is supporting this project as well. So that's a new program, and communities would access that directly. We don't put our dollars in until the housing is under construction. So the community is taking that risk in their confidence that the project is going to move forward, because if it doesn't, our funds don't come in, and they may have already made that infrastructure investment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what, you say you're a third of the way to the goal. What kind of houses and what kind of housing have you built so far?
Yeah, so it varies by community and what their individual needs and opportunities are, but there has been multifamily. There's been a number of redevelopment projects, which is great to see, again, leveraging that existing infrastructure and and reinvesting in those communities. And then mostly single family, though. That's what we have seen the most of is single family. And it's great to see those numbers. And in some communities that haven't seen new single family construction for 10, 15 years. And so that was really a core of it, is as that housing it continues to age, and we'll talk about reinvestment here as well, what we're doing to support that. But they weren't getting the new housing stock into their cycle of housing, and so there's going to be this gap. And as housing does age, and eventually will come, out of productive use at some point, but they weren't getting that new product in. So that's been great to see some of our smaller communities start to see some of that new single family construction happening.
Great. So let's talk about the reinvestment. What's the reinvestment and rehabilitation part of it?
Yeah, so I mentioned our Housing and Redevelopment Authority has had some limited rehab dollars in the past, but we've really bolstered that up to provide more dollars. So we often would run out of those funds because they were limited. So with that $2 million allocation that I mentioned, part of that is geared towards that reinvestment. So both single family, we have been fortunate and appreciative of small cities development program funds from the state of Minnesota but we have 21 cities in Otter Tail County, and many of them are small, like under 1,000 people small. And it's really hard for them to be competitive in that program, just based on, again, limited funds from the state and having to have the numbers to make a competitive application. So we're mirroring a local program for those communities who haven't been able to access those state dollars for single family reinvestment. So that's one. So we're working and to bring it into our township areas, which don't can't access those state resources. So
Mm-hmm.
so making it more broad based on an individual basis to do that single family rehab. So that launched this summer. So we're excited now to again reinvest in that housing stock, because it is a lot less to reinvest and maintain a unit that's already existing than to try to support a new unit. So so that's been really great to get off the ground. And then we also added a multifamily rehab program to work with our owners, again, to reinvest in that multifamily product as well. So really excited that we have those tools now and the resources behind it to really put our our dollars into where we're seeing that need and hearing from our communities. We also know when those rehabs take place, the spinoff effect in a neighborhood on that block. You know, they say, "Oh, well, look at how nice, that so nice that they did that. Maybe we could figure out that." And so it really does have a spinoff effect when you do that rehab and see those projects, what it might spur in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that's so important, especially in smaller towns where you just don't have that housing, that natural housing churn. And an older person may just stay in their home because there's no place for them to go otherwise.
Yeah.
And so how does it work? How does the program work for, say, a family that's looking at a particular home? Say that the current owner has moved out and the house is in not the greatest of condition, and the renovation costs added to the price of the house would actually make it more expensive than what the bank would even be willing to lend. So how
Right.
does that program fit in there?
Yeah. So well, step back. So one, we also have first time home, or not just first time home buyers, but home buyer down payment assistance. And so
Oh,
that's
okay.
another program that's bolstered. And particularly now, our demand has gone up substantially in the last couple months for obvious reasons, with interest rates rising and the continued rise. They still need to qualify um, for a mortgage, but we can help with that down payment side of it. And so that's another piece. So try to get folks into homes that might not otherwise be able to start that home ownership journey. So just to mention that piece. And then the rehab, it does have some income parameters on this. We did go a little higher in what that income is than what some programs might have. So like USDA, some other programs. So we went a little higher because we were really seeing that need. Because of the increased housing costs, it is hard to make those investments. So yeah, so we do have how it works. There's an application process, and we provide up to $20,000 of rehab dollars. The scope does need to be approved, and it is pretty core in what we work on. It isn't for a new swimming pool. It isn't
Right.
for
Fancy
things like that.
countertops.
Yeah, yeah. But quality, we certainly look for
Mm-hmm.
quality, and but making sure that the structure of the home is invested in for the long term. So yeah, it's a pretty simple process. The application is fairly short, and then we work through it to look at the bids, and we help, and it's helpful to the owners too, because they may not know where to start, and so we can provide some of that construction guidance on getting bids. What should the bid look like? What details should they be seeing? How to make sure the right permits get pulled, and so it provides that support to someone who may not otherwise have done that type of work in a home before.
Okay. Yeah. So is the whole program, is the big build program, is that something that could be replicated in other counties?
Yeah, and I have talked to other folks who've reached out in other neighboring counties or regions who have just said, well, what is it? Well, it's whatever you want it to be and where your policymakers want to support, depending if it's a regional group. I've had a couple of regional agencies reach out, and it's where do you have the resources? And when we started, we didn't have any cash. I'll just, and I always make that point. We did the tax rebate for new single family, but that's all future money that when they build it will refund the new taxes. So there was really no cash into that program. So I try to help people think about, even if you don't have the resources, think about where you might be able to make a difference. And even if it's in, grant application preparation. So that's one, just that capacity side. Do you have the staff to provide capacity to access some of the resources through Minnesota Housing or Federal Home Loan Bank or some of these areas that might then bring some cash in that isn't, you don't have to rely on your local dollars to do that. And in really learning what talk to your communities, talk to the lenders, talk to your residents. Where are there barriers? Where, well, I would move out of the single family home if I had a senior product that was affordable. And so affordable senior housing is something that we're really focused on going forward. And getting more involved in the direct construction and development side, which takes capacity and resources, but we're starting small, probably a sixplex. But that's something that and I know that's research that churn that we've used that word that we picked up from you guys, that we need to help our small communities have that churn. And so, is that just, moving people over into a different product that might be more appropriate for them? And it just doesn't exist though. So how do we help make that transition? And then as we think about those, the senior units, that they're, can they serve another demographic at some point in the future? So not designing them too specifically for, they're not assisted living, they're not, that we're not in that market, but in that general occupancy senior designated unit is where we're dabbling in next.
I love all this, just this reinvention and thinking, and not just kind of throwing your hands up and going, well, nobody's coming here. Nobody's going to build houses here. We can't do anything. We can't win kind of attitude. You guys went out there and kind of grabbed it by the tail.
Yes, we did. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Was that just the county, or was that who all was involved in putting this all together?
Sure. So it really has been county led. So my position is new. In 2019, I started with the county when they formed the Community Development Agency. So we do have that separate agency within the county. So it's embedded within. I'm a county employee, but also served the Community Development Agency and its board as well. So that's been, and that was the impetus was to spur this housing. There was a recognition again back to the workforce needs. And then the data was showing that as our population was going to age, and even though we were projected to grow to some degree with that aging population, out of leaving the workforce, that our labor force was going to be declining by approximately 5% from 2020 to 2030. So with that, kind of really important data point, when we already were struggling to find the workers that were needed to fill jobs throughout the county, that was the real impetus, where the county board said, hey, what can we do, what are the opportunities, and figured out how to do it. And so they formed the Community Development Agency. I came on board in, like I said, beginning of 2019, and just kind of worked to figure out what could we do, and this is where we are. Yeah.
Great. And so you have what, 2 or 3 years left in your goal, and how confident are you that you'll meet it?
Well, I mean, certainly the changes with interest rates are making a big difference. We're seeing delayed projects. Just that financing market. We made it through the pandemic, and now we're in the new impacts that are coming forward. So, it was an aspirational goal. We did look back at unit production. How many units had come online, housing units in the prior 5 years. The data isn't perfect. And now one also improvement is we're better at tracking that data. We have some systems in place that we're able to more accurately pull that information throughout it, particularly because a lot of our growth happens in our township areas which don't have building permits. And so we had to we have a good system now. But so I'd like to say I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, we are producing more units that we know, at least based on the data we could pull in prior years and make some best estimates of what was getting produced previously. We know there's some communities that are going gangbusters. We have some local cities who have developed companion programs that city of Ottertail, which is like 600 people. They have what they call building big, so very similar, but we work together and we've helped a couple of other projects there. A small community, but they've added, they're expecting to add, 20% new housing units.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, they were, I think, the number 2 housing unit producer last year.
Wow, making it work.
Crazy. Yeah, I mean, they have some dynamics, certainly. They're on the shores of Ottertail Lake, and so they have some locational benefits but they now are leveraging that. They hadn't necessarily done that in the past. And the city was involved. The city, purchased land and is looking again at that spectrum of housing. They have a lot of, single family homes that serve a certain demographic, but they really wanted to make sure that they had that spectrum of opportunity for people to live in their community.
Yeah, well, and Ottertail County is such a beautiful county.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't want to live there with all the lakes,
yeah.
with all the lakes and the woods and everything. So, yeah. Well, is there anything else that we should know about, the big build or about Ottertail County and all the jobs you have and things like that?
Yeah, there's always things to talk about. We could keep going. But I think the idea, if others want to think about what they can do, is really just starting to have the conversation. And so in every area is different and every area is unique, but to identify what are the opportunities, because there are, and to think about, again, what that is, and understanding that that it is complex, but there's ways, to really parse it down to get action and see progress in the area.
So if people want to find out more about this, who do they contact? Do they contact you or?
Yeah, they can contact me directly. They can visit the county website. We do have a lot of the background information as well as our program side on the county's website, or they can go to bigbuildotc.com, and that'll get you right to that housing program page and see more about what we're doing. There's some videos and stories about some successes we've had, and a little bit more about why we're doing what we're doing, and doing it collectively. I think that's a big message that we try to put out there. This isn't us, the county, doing this. This is us working together to meet our shared goals. And it's really, where are the opportunities? How can we help advance that opportunity is how we approach it.
Okay, and that's Big Build. Oh, excuse me. That's bigbuildotc.com, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Amy. This has been great, and we'll have to have you on again to find out how you're progressing.
Yes, I hope we'll have good news in a couple of years.
You bet. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Center of Everywhere podcast, where we explore stories of rural Minnesotans who are making a difference in their communities. Rural isn't in the middle of nowhere, it is in the center of everywhere.